Research has shown that locally based social media groups are flooding fake news into localities with no reliable news sources. What a shame this has led investigators to the wrong conclusion. The Guardian tells us misinformation was nearly 3 times more common in areas with little or no recognised local journalism, according to a study of tens of thousands of posts. Immigration and Islamophobia were the most common topics of misinformation across Facebook and X. Spikes in misinformation were identified around local elections. Misinformation grew as a share of news posts by 56% in the run-up to polling day, compared with earlier in the year, from 8.2% of all news posts to 12.9%. The findings by the Social Market Foundation, SMF, think tank, are based on the analysis of more than 125,000 social media posts across local Facebook groups, X searches and Nextdoor communities. They led to immediate calls for action from senior MPs. With the decline in financial peril faced by local news outlets, inaccurate online forums are filling the void. One post falsely suggested Birmingham Council meetings had stopped being conducted in English altogether. Another pointed to a false expansion of London's congestion charge. And yet another pointed to a plan to make the countryside less white. Places with few or no local news outlets had nearly 3 times as many misinformation posts as the average. More than 4.4 million people in the UK now live in a news desert where there is no dedicated local news provider. The SMF research found that 2 in 5 local Facebook groups and more than 4 in 5 X searches featured at least one piece of misinformation in their most recent 1,000 posts. Nearly 1 in 26 news-related posts on Facebook contained misinformation. On X, the ratio was more than 1 in 4. That Guardian article relates the rise of fake news to the decline of trusted local news outlets, but I think this is the wrong way round. It would be more accurate to say that established institutional news outlets declined because members of the public lost faith in their reliability. Ironically, this has made them more vulnerable to fake news on the social media. Meanwhile, independent sites that provide genuinely reliable insight on current affairs, like the Whip Line, struggle for the attention they deserve because the algorithms running social media sites like Facebook and X promote the more emotive fake news stories instead. I watched my former site, Vox Political, go to the wall because people were directed to fake news instead. Appeals to successive governments, Tory and Labour, for action to make the social media platforms fairer were rejected by both parties. Vox Political was supported by advertising, and with the supply of readers choked off, advertising revenue dried up. The Whip Line is subscription-based, and even though the number of paying subscribers needed is much smaller than the number of readers necessary to make good money from adverts, my site is struggling to build a readership because of gatekeeping by the social media. And I don't see much possibility of change while those platforms actively promote fake news and legislators look the other way. A huge part of the problem is the institutional insistence that public trust in official narratives has collapsed, and this is what has driven readers and viewers to alternatives where fake news has flourished. The Guardian wants to treat this as a consequence of 2 events. First is the collapse of local journalism as a viable business. But this has happened because people have lost faith in local news outlets' trustworthiness. Second is the replacement of editorial judgment by algorithmic gatekeeping and amplification. People did not simply migrate to local Facebook groups because newspapers disappeared. They did it because they increasingly believed established institutions omit, distort, moralize, or selectively frame reality. Let's take one of the stories mentioned by The Guardian as an example, the claim that there was a plan to make the countryside less white. This was based on government research suggesting that many national parks and countryside areas are perceived as a white environment that is mainly used by white middle-class people, and that this could make them feel less relevant to an increasingly multicultural UK society. The result was a recommendation that people from ethnic minorities should be encouraged to visit and use protected landscape and the natural environment in rural areas. But the fake news mob twisted this into a claim that foreigners were being encouraged to move into rural areas and supplant the local populations. I published an article setting out the facts of the matter and explaining why neither the fake news stories nor the government's research was trustworthy. I'll post the link down below. Feel free to read it. Hardly anybody else has. My argument that institutions increasingly begin with unsupported assumptions, then construct consultation and evidence-gathering exercises designed to validate them, is not fake news, of course. It is a critique of governance methodology. And this is where the Guardian article becomes revealing in ways it probably did not intend. The SMF study appears to classify misinformation largely through alignment with recognized institutional accounts. But what happens when institutions themselves are misleading, selective, politically motivated, or simply wrong? I'm willing to bet you can think of examples where institutional narratives collapsed off the top of your head. I mean, here are some that I've covered. The Iraq War, Hillsborough, the Post Office Horizon scandal, and grooming gang failures. In each case, people who questioned the prevailing narratives were initially branded irresponsible, conspiratorial, or harmful, purveyors of fake news. That memory now shapes public behavior. We have all learned that just because our institutions want us to believe something, that doesn't mean it is true. So, it would be more accurate to say that the old institutions and authorities did the damage themselves, destroying public trust in them by themselves supporting fake news. And now they're crying because genuine independent journalism can't get a foothold in an environment where there is an economic incentive to reward emotionally charged, fabricated outrage over balanced factual accuracy. Social media platforms monetize rage, identity affirmation, fear, tribal reinforcement, and constant novelty. Fabricated memes about migrants, councils, Muslims, reform, Labour, or two-tier policing can generate massive circulation in hours because they trigger emotion immediately. A carefully evidenced local investigation may take weeks to research and produce only modest engagement, if any at all. I'm not saying this is intentional, but engagement-based ranking systems naturally favour emotionally charged simplification over qualified analysis. Governments were happy participants in this distortion for years because platform concentration looked economically modern and politically useful. And now, independent publishers like myself are struggling to gain a foothold because of this inversion in the trust hierarchy. Because readers are suspicious of institutions that attempt to provide authoritative information and gravitate instead to emotionally charged accusations, platform moderation systems have been trained to support falsehoods and fight high-quality journalism. This means genuinely independent investigative work ends up trapped between algorithmic suppression and conspiracy ecosystems. With no trusted source anymore, everybody believes everybody else is pushing fake news. There is an easy way to fight the fakes, though. It goes back to the principle of journalism that I learned when I first started my course with the National Council for the Training of Journalists. You see, I am fully and properly qualified to write news and news-based articles. That principle is, every story must be based on evidence. So when you see some piece of clickbait telling you the latest thing the author wants you to get angry about, just ask yourself, and them, one question that should clarify whether they can be trusted. And that question is, where's your proof? If they can't provide an answer, you'll have yours.